everybody? What's up, everybody logging on right now? That blessed girl, Social Sniper, Golden Gate, Barry Manilow, Osiv, Shiloh, my man Brolic Arm, Helly Hooper. Hey, hey,
Hey.
can you guys hear me well?
Yep.
Yes, we can. What's
Thank you so
up?
much. What's happening? Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm excited to do this.
No doubt, no doubt. Before we get into a little history about you two and some background, and while everybody's logging on, can you guys tell me briefly how you guys been maintaining during this COVID era going on right now?
Yeah, we've been doing pretty good actually, thankfully. We've both been healthy and we've been keeping really creative and doing a bunch of fun projects, practicing, evolving ourselves as DJs and as creative people. Like Rob's upped his editing game. I've started learning other things. Like I think all DJs have had to become sort of like video production sound engineers over COVID. So yeah, we've been busy. We started White Chocolate, which is our sort of official duo. Yeah, do you want to add anything to that?
No, she said it perfectly. Just been staying creative, man.
Yeah.
And
Did you guys
positive.
find it? Did you guys find it more of a blessing or a curse during this time?
For me, and I feel weird saying this because I know a lot of people are hurting right now,
Right.
whether it's economically or emotionally, physically, not being able to really interact with their friends and go to clubs and bars. DJs can't play out the way they used to. But for me, honestly, this whole thing has propelled my hustle. I'm teaching more. I've gotten closer with my girlfriend creatively, emotionally, like the same things that I feel people are depressed about regarding
Right.
COVID, for me, have been a non-issue. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I'm just super thankful, man, that I'm okay and that I've survived this whole situation unscathed.
Absolutely. For everybody logging on right now, this is History Lesson episode 94. I am with Dilly and Rob Swift, known as White Chocolate.
What's
Thank you so
up?
much again for joining me. We're going to do a little background history, then we're going to work our way up to what you two have going on right now. We'll start with you, Dilly. Can you tell us a little bit where you were born and raised?
Yeah, so I'm originally from London, Camden, NW3. Represent. And I grew up there listening to London underground music scene, grime, bass music, and just a little Afrobeat, obviously, which is huge in London. And I moved to New York in 2018 to continue my education. And about 5 months after I moved here, I met this one, and then the sort of rest is history. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Awesome. What about you, Rob Swift? Take us back to where you're born and raised.
Born and raised in Jackson Heights, Queens. Grew up with an older brother that was immersed in hip hop music and hip hop culture, and I learned the ropes through him. Man, I dabbled in breakdancing. I dabbled in graffiti. I dabbled in rhyming. I dabbled in obviously DJing. And out of the four elements, DJing was the one element that I felt I was best at. So I stayed with that and feel like I've been doing it the majority of my life. Well, not even feel like I have. That is a fact. And
Right.
and it's just been fun here in Queens because, you know, worldwide people are accustomed to hearing the narrative that hip hop started in the Bronx. And while it did, Queens played a pivotal role in the culture and the way it's grown. Um, and I was there to see it, you know, through the eyes of my brother, who was just one of those kids on a cardboard, you know, piece of box on a corner somewhere breakdancing with a radio and his friends. You know what I mean? Like I used to see my brother just really get into the culture. And I don't know, when I look back and think about like the way I started and where I ended up, it's just a huge honor, man, and a supreme blessing that I'm here and able to continue to do something that I love and have grown up doing for fun.
Dope. Dilly, growing up in London, what kind of obstacles, if any, did you have to endure growing up there?
Obstacles. Well, I grew up in quite a mixed environment, and so growing up in the city, you have hyper stimulation, you might say. And so, I mean, living in a city is a blessing because you have all the culture, all the art, all these subcultures meshing around. And honestly, I wouldn't say there was any obstacles necessarily, apart from the weather, I mean,
Right.
which is great all the time. But aside from that, London's so vibrant, and I really had a great time living in London. I think I moved to New York mainly just to get a breath of fresh air and experience something new elsewhere, and New York's obviously an incredibly culturally vibrant place. But yeah, like shout out to my London family and London, because you know London's a great place, and yeah, no shade to London.
What about you, Rob Swift? Any obstacles growing up where you were from?
Well, my experience is different than Dilly's because I grew up not in the best of economic situations. You know what I mean? Like my mom and dad migrated here from Colombia, and in Colombia they were professionals, you know, young professionals. My dad was a supervisor at a hospital where my mom worked as a nurse, and that's how they met. So, you know, they had their hustle going on in Colombia, but then my dad, I think, came to the realization that he wanted to provide a platform for his offspring to do better than him, you know?
Right.
And I feel like all immigrants think about America as being that country that you could be whatever you want to be and have success. And my dad wanted to live that American dream. So he migrated here in the late 60s and got himself situated, sent for my mom and my older brother. And I was the first American born out of the family. And they had to start from scratch. Excuse the pun.
Right.
But yeah, they had to start from the very beginning, man. So my mom and my dad both took up jobs at factories, and they were working with their hands, you know. And to this day, like whenever I tell people that, like I think about my dad's hands, and you could see that that guy has worked with his hands for the majority of his life, man. And so you know, it wasn't obstacles. Yeah, like we had economic obstacles because obviously my parents were here trying to make a way for my brother and I, and they had to like scratch and claw. So, you know, I could have easily been one of those kids, like a lot of my friends growing up in junior high school, that ended up doing a life bid in jail.
Right.
Or worse, you know, 6 feet under. You know what I mean? Because I grew up in not the best of economic situations. And when you're not in that situation of like being able to just buy whatever you want, whenever you want it, and you have influences that will tell you, well, let's turn to selling drugs or robbing people or whatever the case is, it's easy to follow that path. But thankfully, you know, although there were obstacles, music kept me focused and DJing kept me focused and wanting to be better than my brother and as good as Red Alert and as good as Choco7ate kept me home safe practicing, you know? So to this day, I'm still that dude that like, I'd rather be at home practicing with Dilly, coming up with a dope routine than out at a bar, DJing even a lot of the times. Cause I don't know, I just feel like being creative at the end of the day is the most important thing, regardless of, as you asked, like what the obstacles are. Like, as long as you're creative, man, everything works itself out. And obviously in my case, it has.
Very dope. Dilly, growing up in London, what was some of your earlier musical influences before you got into DJing? What were you listening to coming up?
Well, I had a really varied musical experience because from the age of like 2 or 3, I started playing the piano. And then a couple of years later, the violin came along and then the saxophone. And I was involved in like the Royal Academy of Music and a lot of like heavy classical music experience, orchestras, ensembles. So I was really highly like officially educated in classical music. But then as I got a bit older and a bit more independent, I started delving into sort of popular music, right? And my parents had me listening to, you know, a lot of progressive rock. So Queen, then like the punk and post-punk stuff, like The Clash, because my dad was sort of that era. And my mum's Polish, so she has like a lot of interesting music, and she immigrated to England in the like right just as the wall came down.
Uh-huh.
So for her, like 80s pop music is like super nostalgic for her. But as an individual, I got onto a lot of grime, a lot of Afrobeat. I remember in the kind of mid 2010s, early to mid 2010s, that was like a lot of grime, a lot of electronic music. I'm not entirely sure how you would describe it, but like electronic, like bassy, like festival music, if you want to put it that way.
Right.
A lot of underground stuff, and yeah, and obviously I was listening to a bit of hip hop. Like I'm quite eclectic, so I like my 70s soul and funk. I'm super interested in music because of my classical music education. It kind of opened me out to the theory of it. So yeah, definitely an eclectic taste, but at least whilst I was in London, yeah, grime, Afrobeat, and electronic music was like the big influences in my life.
What about yourself, Rob Swift? What were you listening to before DJ became a career move for you?
Well, my dad was a DJ before I picked it up. So I have fond memories of my brother and I helping my dad pack his equipment and transport it to churches, halls, people's homes throughout the city and even the tri-state area. We'd go as far as New Jersey sometimes so that he could play out and make extra money to cover the bills, you know? So watching my dad DJ at parties, clubs, I just remember listening to a lot of Latino, Spanish inspired music. So salsa, merengue. In Colombia, cumbia is very popular. So these are the styles of music that I grew up listening to. Every now and then my dad would ask my brother and I, like, what are the new in Spanish? He'd be like, ¿cuáles canciones ahora están presentando por el radio que son buenas? And that means like, what songs are being played right now on the radio that are good, that I could play? Because it's not like he was really into American music. And my brother and I would tell him about Michael Jackson and Prince and stuff like that. And then he'd go out and buy the records and add them to his, you know, his set. But again, I had an older brother that was into hip hop, and my brother would get a hold of tapes from Grandmaster Flash, Bambaataa, Kool Herc, Cold Crush Brothers, Fantastic Five Freaks, and he'd sit me down and play tapes of Flash cutting up Love Rap by Spoonie G. Or I have memories of like Jazzy J cutting up Big Beat and the Jazzy Five rhyming. Like, I grew up listening to all styles of music, Latin, rock, you know, songs like Big Beat, Billy Squire, Run DMC rapped over it for a song called Here We Go. Those are rock songs. Walk This Way. Peter Piper sampled a jazz song. So whatever the DJs were playing in that era is what I listened to, because again, I was studying this culture. So like Dilly, I have a pretty eclectic taste in music. I listen to everything still: jazz, rock, R&B, disco, soul. Yeah, you know, she and I will be driving to the supermarket and we'll be pumping like some rock sometimes, or soul music. You know, you would think because we are known for like our DJ theatrics and scratching and all that, that we for the most part listen to hip hop, but a lot of people don't realize that true authentic hip hop is a mixture of all genres of music. And if you are really into the culture of hip hop and understanding music from a DJ's perspective, then you're going to expose yourself to as much music as you can, because the objective is always to be able to cater to any audience, you know? So it's not like you're just going to hear Mobb Deep if you're driving in a whip with me. You're going to hear the songs that Mobb Deep sampled as well.
Yeah.
Right. Very dope. Dilly, at what point did you decide to pick up the turntable and pursue that a little more?
It's a good question. I always had an inkling that I might want to do something like that because, you know, as a musician, DJing sort of like, you know, another limb of that body, you know. So I bought some controllers that I literally never touched a couple of years before I moved to America, because I tried to learn online and it was just this cacophony of like bad DJ like tutorials. So I was like, okay, no, maybe this isn't the right time for me. Then I moved to New York and I took a class just as like something to fill up my schedule, which was DJ skills and styles. And that's how I met Rob. And yeah, I was really interested in Rob as a person because he's obviously really accomplished. He's done something very creative with DJing, which is not the usual sort of like knob twisting techno DJ, which no shade to that, but like that's kind of mainly what I'd seen. You know, growing up in London, where like, at least when I was growing up, hip hop wasn't something I would like go and see in venues that often. Maybe, you know, Schoolboy Q and people like that would perform, but not like OGs. You know, I didn't see, you know, Mathematics DJing for Wu-Tang, for example. So I just jumped really deep, really quickly into turntablism and like hip hop from an educational standpoint, in the way Rob was teaching it, like breaking it down right from the beginning, the Bronx, Grandmaster Flash, Cool Herc, Bambaataa, like all of that part of hip hop I'd never really known. I'd kind of only really known mainly 90s hip hop onwards. And yeah, I just kept asking you loads and loads of questions and watching videos after class, and I was like, yo, this shit is crazy. Like this is actually like a musical instrument. This is a skill. And like I'd quit classical music like a couple of years before that. So I had this like void in my life where I wanted to do something physical with music and create, but I didn't really have a channel for it. And then sort of all the elements came, you know, all the planets aligned basically, and it's been history since. Like I've jumped into it and I love it, and it's been my outlet for creativity pretty much since. So yeah, I mean, you can ask Rob because he's been there since day one with me.
She's dope. She's really dope, man, because, you know, a lot of people from Dilly's generation that get into DJing do it for the social clout, you know, because they know that being a DJ right now is probably the most popular thing you could do as an artist, you know?
Right.
So there are people that go out and spend $2,000 on a mixer, you know, $1,800 on a turntable that doesn't even have tone arms, and a $2,000 laptop, and download a bunch of MP3s, and then they're like, all right, I'm a DJ now and I'm gonna post videos, and that means I'm gonna get followers, and you know, they think about the
outcome rather than the process.
Right, exactly. And she was not like that. She was more process. Dilly was more process oriented, and that just made a big impression on me because we need more of that. And naturally, when you meet someone and you connect over something, then that energy propels you, and you start to vibe on other levels. And that's what happened with us. You know, we naturally just became super close, and now we're just this cool team, and we post our videos and we have fun and we share our passion for DJing together with people. And it's been a blessing, man. And that's what we've been doing like this whole lockdown. It's just growing as a couple, growing as a couple that loves DJing and enjoys music. And
as an editing team, you do not realize the work that goes in before those videos and shit.
Right.
But just to like to add to Rob's point, I think something that